Breeder called these horses worthless and abandoned them. 1 year later, he saw them again and broke down. The morning air carried a sharp chill, the kind that hinted at the arrival of winter. At Meadowridge Stables, a sprawling estate renowned for breeding champions, the day began like any other. Workers bustled around the barn, preparing the prized horses for their morning exercises. The rhythmic clatter of hooves against cobblestones and the occasional snort of a stallion created a symphony of discipline and grandeur. Standing at the center of it all was Charles Whitman, a man as commanding as the estate he owned. His tailored coat and polished boots reflected his obsession with perfection, an obsession that had turned Meadowridge into a name synonymous with equestrian excellence. To Charles, horses were more than animals. They were investments, trophies of his unyielding pursuit of superiority. As Charles made his routine inspection, his sharp eyes narrowed at the sight of a stable hand leading 3 frail foals into the yard. The contrast was jarring. Amid the glossy coats and powerful builds of the other horses, these foals looked out of place, like forgotten remnants of a failed experiment. The smallest of the 3 staggered slightly as it was prodded forward. Its legs wobbled with each step, and its dull coat hung loosely over a bony frame. The stable hand hesitated, as if dreading Charles's reaction. "What is this?" Charles's voice cut through the air like a whip. He stepped closer, his expression a mix of disbelief and disdain. "Is this some kind of joke?" The stable hand shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were born weak, sir. The vet said they might improve with time, but—" Charles raised a hand to silence him. "Time?" he scoffed. "Time won't fix this." He gestured toward the foals, his tone cold and final. "They're worthless. They'll never amount to anything. We don't have the luxury of charity here." The foals seemed to sense the judgment being passed on them. They huddled together, their tiny bodies trembling against the biting wind. One of them, a lanky bay with a crooked leg, tried to nuzzle against the smallest, offering a semblance of comfort. But even this tender moment was short-lived as Charles barked out his orders. "Load them up and get rid of them," he said, turning on his heel. "Take them far enough that they don't find their way back." The stable hands hesitated, their expressions betraying a flicker of pity. But pity had no place at Meadowridge. With heavy hearts, they led the foals toward a rusted old trailer parked at the edge of the property. The foals resisted at first, their tiny hooves slipping against the ramp as they were ushered inside. The smallest one, a fragile chestnut later named Willow, hesitated at the threshold. For a brief moment, her wide, tear-filled eyes met Charles's. There was no anger in them, only confusion and fear, as if silently asking why she was being cast aside. But Charles had already turned away, his attention back on the sleek stallions grazing in the distance. The trailer creaked and groaned as it rolled down the dirt road, each bump jostling the frightened foals inside. They clung to each other, their small bodies pressed together for warmth and comfort. The driver, a man tasked with following orders, kept his eyes on the road, ignoring the occasional whimpers that reached his ears. Hours passed before the truck came to a stop. The driver stepped out, opened the trailer door, and prodded the foals out into an open field. The land stretched endlessly under a gray sky, barren and unforgiving. A trickle of water from a distant stream was the only sign of life. The foals stumbled onto the cold, hard ground. Willow's legs gave way as she landed, her frail body shivering against the wind. The driver glanced at them one last time before slamming the trailer door shut. As the truck disappeared over the horizon, the foals were left in deafening silence. The vastness of the field seemed to swallow them whole, their tiny figures dwarfed by the endless expanse of nothingness. The smallest one let out a weak, plaintive whinny, a sound that faded into the growing dusk. Night fell, bringing with it a biting cold. The foals huddled together for warmth, their silhouettes barely visible against the darkness. The stars above offered no comfort, only a silent witness to their abandonment. Morning broke over the desolate field where the foals had been left, but the sun's warm rays did little to lift the cold grip of their despair. Their breaths came out in soft puffs of mist, and the youngest, Willow, struggled to keep her frail body upright. Hunger gnawed at their insides, and the promise of survival seemed to dwindle with each passing hour. But fate often works in mysterious ways. Just as the foals began to lose hope, the distant sound of hooves crunching against the frozen earth broke the silence. A lone figure on horseback emerged over the horizon, their silhouette stark against the rising sun. It was Eleanor Grant, a local woman known in the area for her compassion and her uncanny ability to heal broken animals. Eleanor had been out scouting the fields for wild plants when she spotted the frail figures in the distance. Her heart clenched at the sight. What were these young horses doing here, so far from any shelter? She urged her mare, a steady chestnut named Ginger, to quicken her pace. As she approached, the scene became heartbreakingly clear. The foals were emaciated, their coats matted with dirt and their eyes dull from exhaustion. Eleanor dismounted, her boots crunching softly on the frost-covered ground. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice gentle as a lullaby. She crouched low to make herself less threatening, extending a hand toward them. The foals froze, their instincts telling them to run, but their weakened bodies betrayed them. Willow, trembling and hesitant, took a tentative step forward, drawn to the soothing tone of Eleanor's voice. "There you go, sweetheart," Eleanor murmured, reaching into her satchel for a handful of oats. She placed them on the ground and backed away slightly, giving them space. One by one, the foals sniffed at the offering, their hunger overpowering their fear. Eleanor's heart ached as she observed their condition. She noticed the smallest one's wobbly legs and the crooked posture of another. These weren't wild horses, they'd been bred and abandoned. But why? Ginger whinnied softly, as if encouraging the foals. Eleanor smiled faintly and stroked her mare's neck. "We'll take them home, girl. They deserve a chance." The journey back to Eleanor's modest ranch was slow and challenging. She had to coax the foals every step of the way, pausing frequently to let them rest. Ginger, sensing the fragility of her new companions, walked beside them, her presence strangely reassuring. Once they reached the ranch, Eleanor led the foals into a spacious paddock lined with soft hay and fresh water. The foals hesitated at the entrance, unsure of this new environment. Willow looked up at Eleanor, her wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "You're safe now," Eleanor said softly, giving Willow a gentle pat on the neck. It didn't take long for the foals to realize they were in a place of care. They drank deeply from the water trough, their thirst finally quenched, and nibbled at the hay. Eleanor watched from a distance, tears welling up in her eyes. She had seen countless animals in need, but these foals carried a sadness that was hard to describe. Despite their newfound safety, the road to recovery was anything but easy. The foals' frail bodies struggled to adapt to proper nutrition, and their trust in humans had been shattered. Willow, in particular, seemed to carry the deepest scars. She flinched at sudden movements and often stayed at the edges of the paddock, away from the others. Eleanor was patient. She spent hours sitting near the paddock, reading aloud from a book or simply humming a tune. She knew that healing wasn't just about feeding their bodies. It was about mending their spirits. Slowly, the foals began to respond. Willow was the first to take a tentative step toward Eleanor one quiet afternoon. The woman had been sitting in the grass, sketching in a notebook, when she felt a soft nudge against her shoulder. She turned to see Willow standing there, her eyes filled with cautious curiosity. "There you are," Eleanor said with a warm smile, her voice trembling with emotion. She extended a hand, and Willow pressed her soft nose into it. From that moment, a bond began to form. Eleanor named the other two foals Aspen and Birch, giving each a name that symbolized strength and resilience. Together, they began a journey that would change their lives forever. The foals' journey of transformation began with seemingly insignificant steps that held monumental significance. In their weakened state, even learning to trust a new hand or standing steadily for longer periods became victories worth celebrating. Eleanor introduced them to a daily routine designed to rebuild their strength. She started with small, manageable tasks: a short walk around the paddock, a few minutes of grooming, and offering fresh vegetables as treats. These moments tested the foal's endurance and trust. Aspen, the strongest of the three, was the first to respond, playfully nudging Birch to join him. Birch followed reluctantly, his initial steps wobbly yet determined. Willow, however, remained hesitant. While her siblings began to explore their surroundings with cautious curiosity, Willow often stood at a distance, her frail frame betraying years of neglect. One morning, as Eleanor entered the paddock, she brought a small brush and sat down near Willow. Quietly, she began to hum a soft tune. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, Willow allowed Eleanor to brush her, the rhythmic strokes soothing her fear. Each milestone brought a mix of relief and tension. Eleanor kept a notebook where she documented every small achievement. Aspen trotted today, first time since arrival. Birch allowed me to check his hooves without flinching. Willow whinnied for the first time. A soft, hopeful sound, yet the weight of their trauma lingered. Progress was slow, and setbacks were frequent, keeping Eleanor on edge and the audience deeply invested. Eleanor wasn't immune to struggles of her own. Running a small ranch with limited resources made the responsibility of caring for the foals daunting. Veterinary bills piled up, feed costs increased, and her personal savings dwindled faster than she had anticipated. There were nights when she sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea, wondering if she had taken on more than she could handle. Her moments of vulnerability were shared with her closest confidant, her brother Samuel, a kind but pragmatic man who often stopped by to help with repairs around the ranch. Ellie, he'd say, leaning on the fence as he watched the foals, "You can't save the world. Maybe it's time to let go." Eleanor's resolve, however, never wavered. "It's not about saving the world, Sam," she replied one evening, her voice steady. "It's about saving their world." Still, the pressure mounted. A particularly harsh winter brought sickness to the foals, and Eleanor spent sleepless nights nursing them. Willow developed a cough that wouldn't go away, and Eleanor feared the worst. In those moments, the audience would feel the suspense tighten, wondering if the foal's story would end before it had truly begun. Just as Eleanor began to feel the weight of isolation, the story takes a heartwarming turn. One frosty morning, as she was mucking the stalls, a knock echoed at the ranch door. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to find a group of local farmers and townsfolk standing there, some holding hay bales, others with tools, and a few leading horses of their own. "We heard about the foals," said Margaret, an elderly woman who ran the town's general store. "Thought you could use a hand." Eleanor was overwhelmed. Over the coming weeks, the community rallied around her. They donated supplies, helped repair fences, and even volunteered their time to assist with the foals' care. Children from the local school visited the ranch, bringing hand-drawn signs that read, "You can do it," and "We believe in you, Willow." These moments of support not only lifted Eleanor's spirits but also played a pivotal role in the foals' recovery. Birch began to show a playful side, chasing a red ball the children had brought. Aspen, once withdrawn, now greeted visitors with gentle nuzzles. Even Willow, inspired by the positive energy, began to step forward when Eleanor called her name. The suspense during this phase lies in the delicate balance between progress and setbacks. Every small success is a reason for celebration, but the constant undercurrent of challenges keeps viewers hooked, wondering if Eleanor and the foals will overcome the odds. A year of love, care, and determination transformed the once-abandoned foals into majestic beings. Aspen, with his strong frame and glossy coat, now exuded confidence, moving with a proud, commanding gait. Birch, who once limped in fear, had grown into a spirited and agile beauty, often seen leaping with grace over makeshift obstacles. Willow, the friliest of them all, had become the heart of the trio, a soft-eyed mare with an undeniable elegance that made her story even more inspiring. Eleanor decided it was time to showcase their transformation. She entered the trio into a local horse competition. It wasn't about winning trophies but proving that what others deemed worthless could shine when given a chance. Eleanor's heart swelled with pride as she dressed the horses in polished tack, their manes braided and gleaming. The sight of them standing tall and proud brought tears to her eyes. This was her dream realized. The day of the competition arrived. The air buzzed with excitement as competitors from across the region gathered. Families set up picnic blankets, children laughed, and the smell of fresh hay and roasted peanuts lingered in the air. Eleanor led Aspen, Birch, and Willow into the arena. A hush fell over the crowd as they saw the horses enter, not because of their appearance but because of the story that had preceded them. "These are the horses everyone gave up on," someone whispered. The event began with a series of trials. Aspen excelled in strength and stamina, pulling a cart of weights with ease, while Birch dazzled the crowd with his agility in an obstacle course. But it was Willow who stole the show during the freestyle showcase. Eleanor walked her to the center of the arena and removed her halter, giving her freedom to move. Willow pranced gracefully, her movements almost choreographed, as if she understood the gravity of the moment. The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing across the grounds. Among the spectators stood a familiar face, the breeder who had once abandoned the foals. His arms were crossed, his expression guarded, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He whispered to his companion, "Is that them?" His disbelief turned to shock as he watched Willow bow gracefully at the end of her performance, the crowd roaring with approval. As the event concluded, the winners were announced. Eleanor and her horses didn't just place. They swept several categories, taking home ribbons and recognition. But for Eleanor, the true victory wasn't in the accolades. It was in the validation of her belief in the foals. The breeder, overcome with curiosity and perhaps guilt, approached Eleanor as she stood beside her horses. His weathered face bore an expression of regret and awe. "Are these the foals I left behind?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Eleanor turned to face him, her expression calm but firm. "Yes," she replied, "the same ones you called worthless." The breeder looked at the horses, now strong and radiant, and then back at Eleanor. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think they had a chance." Eleanor's response was simple but profound. Every creature deserves a chance. They just needed someone to believe in them. The breeder's eyes glistened as he reached out to touch Willow's muzzle. The mare, ever forgiving, allowed him to stroke her gently. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking, "for seeing what I couldn't." The scene left the audience moved, many wiping away tears. It wasn't just the horses who had undergone a transformation. It was the breeder himself. His moment of redemption, fueled by the resilience and beauty of the horses, brought the story full circle. The air was thick with anticipation as the final moments of the event unfolded. The crowd was still buzzing with the excitement of the horses' incredible performances. But for Eleanor, the most significant moment was yet to come. As she stood beside Willow, Aspen, and Birch, watching the breeder approach, her heart raced with a mix of emotions. He had seen the transformation. He had witnessed what they had become. The breeder's face, once stern and dismissive, was now marked with regret. He walked slowly toward Eleanor, his footsteps heavy as if each one carried the weight of the past year. The crowd quieted, sensing the gravity of the moment. Eleanor met his gaze, her expression unreadable. She knew what was coming, yet she wasn't sure how to respond. The breeder stopped a few feet away, looking down at the horses, then up at Eleanor. His voice was thick with remorse. I was wrong," he began, his hands trembling slightly. "When I left them behind, I never thought they would make it. I thought they were weak, too far gone. I didn't believe in them or in what they could become. But seeing them now, I realize how wrong I was." He swallowed hard, his eyes moistening. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for giving up on them. And for giving up on you." The vulnerability in his voice hung in the air like a heavy fog. The crowd, who had been skeptical about his presence at the event, watched in silence, sensing that this was a moment of profound change, not just for the foals but for the breeder himself. His apology wasn't just a recognition of his mistake. It was an acknowledgement of his own growth. Eleanor stood still, absorbing the weight of his words. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, and all that remained was the soft breathing of the horses and the distant murmurs of the crowd. Her mind flashed back to the nights when she doubted herself, wondering if the foals would ever recover, wondering if she had made the right decision in taking them in. The breeder's abandonment had left scars, not just on the horses but on her heart. But now, standing before her was a man who had come to terms with his own mistakes. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the regret that had washed over him as he realized how wrong he had been. It wasn't about making him feel better or accepting an apology for the sake of peace. It was about acknowledging the growth that had occurred in both of them. Eleanor took a deep breath, her heart full of compassion but also strength. She stepped forward, gently stroking Willow's mane as she spoke. "You were wrong," she said softly, her voice steady but firm. "But you're not the only one who was. I was wrong too once. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could save them. But I did. We all did." Her gaze softened, but there was a quiet intensity in her eyes as she continued. "What matters now is not the past. It's the present. These horses, they aren't defined by what you or anyone else thought of them. They're defined by what they've become, what they've overcome. And they've taught me that we can all change. We can all grow." The breeder's eyes shone with tears, and for a moment, it seemed like the weight of his own redemption had settled into his bones. He nodded, his voice barely audible as he whispered, "Thank you for giving them, and me, a chance." Eleanor's heart swelled with a quiet pride. She had shown him that it wasn't too late to change, to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, and to make amends. In that moment, she realized that the horses hadn't just transformed. They had brought healing to everyone involved. The transformation wasn't just physical. It was a complete shift in the horses' roles in the world. Aspen, Birch, and Willow had become more than just symbols of resilience. They had become ambassadors of hope. Their once doubtful existence had blossomed into a life filled with purpose and recognition. Aspen was now a trusted partner for children at the local therapeutic riding center, his calm and powerful presence helping young riders gain confidence and strength. Birch, agile and spirited, had found his place as a show horse, dazzling audiences with his grace and speed in competitions. And Willow, ever the gentle soul, had become a therapy horse for the elderly, offering comfort and solace to those who needed it most. They were no longer the abandoned foals of the past. They were living proof that anyone, could rise from hardship to greatness. Their stories were shared in local communities, inspiring people to look beyond first impressions, to see potential where others saw nothing. As Eleanor stood in the barn, watching her horses, her family, flourish, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a success story for the horses. It was a reflection of the journey she had gone through too. Every challenge they faced had brought them closer, not only to each other but to the world around them. Eleanor, or Emma as she was affectionately known by the community, had changed as well. The woman who once doubted herself had grown into a beacon of strength, compassion, and unwavering belief. The journey with the horses had taught her more about patience, perseverance, and trust than anything else in her life. She had become a respected figure in the local animal rescue community, known for her unshakable belief in second chances. Not just for animals, but for people too. Through the horse's transformation, Emma had healed from her own scars, finding new strength in vulnerability and forgiveness. She now saw the world through a lens of possibility, where the story didn't end at hardship but began anew with each sunrise. Her role had shifted from a caretaker of broken creatures to a leader, an advocate, and a mentor to others who had their own forgotten animals, lost causes, or dreams. She spoke at community events, sharing the horse's story and offering her wisdom to anyone willing to listen. Emma became a living testament to the idea that love, when given without condition, could rewrite destinies. The camera slowly panned across the fields as evening settled in, the golden light casting a warm glow on the landscape. Aspen, Birch, and Willow grazed peacefully, their silhouettes outlined against the setting sun. Emma stood nearby, watching them with a smile that spoke of satisfaction, gratitude, and a quiet knowing that this chapter had come full circle. As the camera focused on Emma, her face reflected not just the joy of success, but the deeper understanding she had gained through this journey. She knelt down to stroke Aspen's mane, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. A perfect moment of connection between woman and horse. In that brief interaction, all the words she had never said were understood. They had saved each other. Emma looked up, her gaze lifting to the horizon, and her heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of peace. The world was full of challenges, of doubt, of moments when it seemed easier to walk away. But in this moment, surrounded by the horses who had changed everything, Emma knew that there was always hope. There was always a chance for redemption. The camera lingered on her smiling face as the final credits rolled, the horses peacefully grazing behind her, their future now full of endless possibilities. Sometimes all it takes is one person, one act of kindness, to change the course of a life. Willow, aspen, and birch were once left behind, forgotten. But with love, patience, and belief, they became something extraordinary. And just like them, we all deserve a second chance. If this story of transformation and redemption inspired you, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that anything is possible when we believe in ourselves. And if you want to hear more stories of hope, change, and the incredible bond between humans and animals, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know, you might just witness the next miracle. Have you ever experienced a moment where something or someone changed your life for the better? Share your story with us in the comments below. We love hearing how love and resilience have made a difference in your life.